This is the 7th and last day of the December 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. Since we will be reading from copyrighted materials, the tape will be in the library but not for sale. And we are reading from the teachings of Wang Po as translated by John Blofeld, Grove Press, New York. From the East-West Journal, July 83. From The Wholeness of Life by J. Krishnamurti, Harper Row, and Krishnamurti's notebook, if we get that far. Harper Row. These are sayings or writings by two teachers who lived 1,000 years apart, Wang Po in China and Krishnamurti, born in India, died in this country a few years ago after some 64 or 5 years of teaching. These books are not brought in as authority. Reading is not for agreeing or disagreeing, but again, can there be open listening? Several of these selections have been read many times over, and there's a tendency for the human brain to, as it were, hum along with something that's familiar, which is not listening. So can one listen to an old song as for the first time? Not getting stuck in agreement or objection. These dialogue and sermons or excerpts from sermons were recorded by Wang Po's disciple Pe Su, who was also governor of the province where Wang Po taught, and a Buddhist scholar. The paragraphs have been edited in that words or paragraphs have been left out, and sometimes an English word substituted for a Sanskrit word. Mind is like the void in which there is no confusion or evil, as when the sun wheels through it, shining upon the four corners of the world. For when the sun rises and illuminates the whole earth, the void gains not in brilliance, and when the sun sets, the void does not darken. The phenomena of light and dark alternate with each other, but the nature of the void remains unchanged. So it is with the mind of the Buddha and of sentient beings. If you look upon the Buddha as presenting a pure, bright, or enlightened appearance, or upon sentient beings as presenting a foul, dark, or mortal-seeming appearance, these conceptions, resulting from attachment to form, will keep you from supreme knowledge, even after passing of as many eons as there are sands in the Ganges. There is only the one mind, and not a particle of anything else on which to lay hold. If you students of the way do not awake to this mind substance, you will overlay mind with conceptual thought. You will seek the Buddha outside yourselves, and you will remain attached to forms, pious practices, and so on, all of which are harmful and not at all the way to supreme knowledge. Pesu as the questioner, asking, what is the way, and how must it be followed? Wangpo, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should wish to follow it? Questioner, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? Wangpo, words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Wangpo, if they are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the Dharma by preachers, the Dharma or the true teaching, for what sort of true teaching could that be? Questioner, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Wangpo, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Wangpo, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Wangpo, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? And void here does not refer to a vacuum, but a universe without words and names and partitions, categories, divisions. The questioner says, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Wangpo, I have not prevented you. But concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Questioner, then should we avoid any feelings in relation to the Dharma, to the truth? Wangpo, where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? Wangpo, you're a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Questioner, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the truth or the true Dharma to us. Wangpo, in the true Dharma or in truth there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of true Dharma can you go seeking for? Or what sort of truth can you go seeking for? Questioner, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Wangpo, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. What is called supreme perfect wisdom implies that there is really nothing whatsoever to be attained. If you're able to understand this, you will realize that the way of the Buddhas and the way of the devils are equally wide of the mark. The original pure glistening universe is neither square nor round, big nor small. It is without any such distinctions as long or short. It is beyond attachment and activity, ignorance and enlightenment. You must see clearly that there is really nothing at all. The great chillicosms, numberless as grains of sand, are mere bubbles. All wisdom and all holiness are but streaks of lightning. None of them have the reality of mind. Mind is one. How can it lack a single hair of anything? He says here, I've usually left this out, but here I read it anyways. Even if you understand this, you must make the most strenuous efforts. Throughout this life, you can never be certain of living long enough to take another breath. When we talk of the knowledge I, in quotation marks, may gain, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my deliverance from rebirth, and my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity. Do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking, and do not look anywhere for the truth, for all that is needed is to refrain from allowing concepts to arise. It is obvious that mental concepts and external perceptions are equally misleading, and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous to you as the way of demons. Full understanding can come to you only through an inexpressible mystery. The approach to it is called the gateway of the stillness beyond all activity. If you wish to understand, know that a sudden comprehension comes when the mind is purged of all the clutter of conceptual and discriminatory thought activity. Those who seek the truth by means of intellect and learning only get further and further away from it. Not till your thoughts cease all their branching here and there, not till you abandon all thoughts of seeking for something, will you be on the right way or the right road. Though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and by sutra study, by scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding, you will awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing having nothing to do with truth. Truth depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent, and uncreated absolute. Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you see it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past, not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. Question about how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that. Wang Po, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, and the future has yet to come. When you practice meditation, sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, and do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Ah, be diligent, be diligent. It was interesting that someone in the retreat talked about this interview which took place in '83 between East-West Journal and Krishnamurti, and then somebody else put it in front of my doorstep. Would I read it maybe? So here it is. I took a few things out. Instead of East-West Journal, I'll say questioner. Even though one is still suffering, is it possible to help others who are suffering? This question came up all during this retreat. Even though one is still suffering, is it possible to help others who are suffering? K, why not? Though I may be suffering and you may be suffering, why not? That's one part of it. The other part is suffering to be ended through a long process of time? To be completely free, does it take time? Does it take evolution? Is it a matter of progressive achievement? Is there such a thing as psychological evolution at all? We have evolved through millennia, and we think we have reached a certain stage psychologically and also physiologically. We have created this world, this society, with all its monstrosity and ugliness, the destruction of the environment, killing each other, perpetual wars for the last 6,000 or 7,000 years. And during this long period of time, we haven't changed, we haven't stopped wars. So will further evolution of 40 or 50,000 years change us, when the 40,000 years before have not? Questioner. But now that we have massive worldwide communications, unique in history, do you think that a transformation of consciousness will emerge? Okay. Through communication? Do you really think so? Questioner. I mean specifically using the media as a tool to raise consciousness. For instance, this film Gandhi has just won the Academy Award. It's basically about peace and about Gandhi's main message of non-violence. Okay, that's rubbish. Unless you go to the root of the matter, you're merely scratching the surface. Questioner. But perhaps people could be inspired by scratching the surface to then try to go to the root. Okay. Inspiration only lasts for a very short while. Very few people ever affect the psyche. Very few. Gandhi is totally forgotten in India. Questioner. There was an article that said that Indians were very impressed by the movie, but were somewhat bemused by the non-violent aspect of it. Okay, that's right. He was a violent man. They're trying to make a saint out of him as the only man who was helping India to be free, which isn't true. There were hundreds. Annie Besant was one. She worked for 40 years helping the country to be free. She's never mentioned. It's all so lopsided. So what is the question? Questioner. The question is, if only a few people throughout history, can they affect the consciousness of man? Questioner. Because as you say, there are many terrible wars, many terrible injustices throughout the world now. How can we change them? Okay, that's a good question. Do you really want us to discuss all this? Questioner, if you have time. Okay, I have time, but one has to be very serious to go into all this. Questioner, that's our personal work as well as our professional concern, to influence society in any way we can. Okay, I don't believe in influence. Questioner, what is your motivation then? What motivates you? Okay, nothing. Questioner, but you've been carrying on all these years. Okay, it's a long story. Suppose that you're enlightened and you're asking, how will you affect the rest of humanity? Has any person, however illumined, affected mankind? It's very doubtful. I'm not being pessimistic. I'm just looking at facts. When you look at facts, you can't be optimistic or pessimistic, right? Put the question the other way. Is human consciousness all one or separate? Do you understand? Is it individual consciousness or consciousness of the entire humanity? My consciousness or X-consciousness, what is that? Or, what is the content of that consciousness? Belief, faith, ideologies, conclusions, concepts, fear, suffering, loneliness, anxiety, and constant struggle from morning to night till he dies, right? That's a fact. But the rest of humanity's consciousness, whether they live in a small village or in one of these tall buildings, is similar to everybody else's. We all share the same consciousness. It can never be individual. The brain is not my brain. It has evolved through several millennia, but we have said, this is my particular brain, my particular consciousness, my country, my God, and so on. So if one person stepped out of this way of thinking, has it any value to the others, to the rest of mankind? Questioner. It appears the Buddha did. He left a technique to practice awareness, and his influence has been very great. Okay. He couldn't have left a technique. After his death, his disciples probably gathered together and put up a scheme. Buddha couldn't possibly have said, "Seek refuge in me." Actually, he said, "Don't." He did say that. Kay didn't read Buddha. The systems came after he died. We think because he had attained some illumination, had suffered and gone through starvation, that we must also go through that in order to achieve what he achieved. And he might say, well, that's all childish stuff. It has nothing to do with enlightenment. Can one person who is illumined, to put it in modern terms, free from all conditioning, affect the consciousness of all the rest of mankind? What do you think, impersonally, objectively, as you look at the world? 2,000 years of Christian propaganda, Jesus is the Savior, and the churches have burned people, tortured people, had hundreds of years of war in Europe. Christians have been one of the greatest killers in the world. I'm not against nor for. I'm just pointing out that this is the result of 2,000 years of, quote, peace on earth, unquote. It has no meaning whether Jesus existed or not. So has all this propaganda, this programming of the brain after 2,000 years of repetition of the Mass day after day affected man at all? Christ said, don't hate your enemy, love your enemy. And everything we do is contrary to that. We don't care. So what will affect man? What will change man who has been programmed, literally programmed like a computer, to worship Jesus, to worship the Buddha, to worship other gods? Can the mind free itself from all programs? Is it possible to be free of taking in information? What the newspapers say, what the magazines say, what the priests, psychologists, the professors say? Education, propaganda on the television, the evangelists in America, that peculiar breed, are all telling me what to think and increasingly what to do. I'm becoming a slave to these specialists. My mind is conditioned and I'm limited. Conditioning limits implies limitation. I'm in battle with everybody else for the rest of my days. And there's the future of man. Okay, then what's the point of it all? Okay, nothing. It has no meaning. So what will you do with the world pressing you on all the time? They won't let you alone. I say, sorry, I won't accept any of it. Whether it's the Buddha, Christ, the Pope, Mr. Reagan telling me what to do, sorry, I won't. This means we have to be extraordinarily capable of standing alone. And nobody wants to do that. Questioner. Do you think there is a truth? Okay, yes. But there is not my truth, your truth. And it has no path. There is no Christian path, Hindu path, Buddhist path, your path, my path. One must be free of all paths to find it. The Hindus have been very clever at this. They say there is the path of knowledge, the path of action, the path through devotion. This suits everybody. Questioner, so you say to stand alone, we find our truth? Okay, no, the word alone means all one. But people say, I can't do it alone, so please help me to put my house in order. And invent the guru, not a particular guru, but the whole idea of gurus. The world of so-called religion, whether it is the religion of Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, Catholics, the whole structure of religious ceremonies is put together by thought, is it not? The Mass was invented by man. They may say it came directly from heaven, but that seems rather absurd. It's been invented by man. The ancient Egyptians had their ceremonies to shape man. It isn't something new, the worship of symbols and figures. The guru, the mantra, various forms of yoga which have been brought over to this unfortunate country are all authorities leading you to meditate and all. We have done it. We have tried Jesus. We have tried every form of person and idea, theory and system. They have not worked. So it's up to me to put my house in order. I cannot depend on anyone else. If you reject the church, the whole religious structure of the world, any kind of spiritual authority, you are free of it. Questioner. Haven't these people and systems been inspiration to some? Okay. What is inspiration? To do something better? You answer it yourself. Questioner. Isn't it to add to the potential of each human being? Okay. Yes, but if I'm asleep, questioner, then it is to wake up. Okay, yes. And all the time I want entertainment to keep me awake. Man wants to be entertained. He wants to escape from himself at any price. This is a fact. The church has done it, and now sports, football, cricket, and so on. It's a vast entertainment. I'm bored, I'm harassed, I'm weary. So I come to you and say, inspire me. For the moment you stimulate me, you act as a drug for the moment, so I depend on you. Questioner. You speak of freedom from something, from religion, from politics. Okay. Freedom is in itself, without any motive, not from or for, just freedom. For instance, I am not a Hindu, I'm free from it. But that's not freedom. I am free from a particular form of prison, but we create other prisons as we go along. The point is, suppose you have understood and have rejected, negated all this, and you want to help me. And now you want to help me. There is something unethical, if I may use the word, in trying to help me, right? Do you understand? Question, I don't understand why. Okay, you're trying to help me. That's your path. But why do I want to be helped? Questioner, because you might be suffering. Okay. Suppose I've lost my son, my wife has left me, I can't get the job I want. How are you going to help me? Why do I seek help? Why do I have this craving to go to somebody to ask help? Questioner, sometimes it is helpful to meet someone who has gone through experiences of suffering. They are an example. Okay, we're doing that now. And how far will you go with it? Questioner, perhaps not the whole way, but it can be a comfort. Okay, then what's the point of it? You've gone so far and stopped. What's the point? So then I become an example. That's the worst thing. There have been many examples of all kinds, so-called heroes who have killed 1,000 people in war. Why then do you want help to follow somebody, to look up to somebody? Why? When there is some kind of disease in me, okay, still speaking, when there's some kind of disease in me, I go to the doctor. If I don't know the direction, I seek help from a police officer. The postman is helping when he brings a letter. In the physiological world, help is necessary. Otherwise we couldn't exist, right? But I'm asking myself, psychologically, inwardly, will anybody help me? Man has suffered through time beyond measure for millennia. What will help him to end that suffering? He goes on killing, he goes on murdering, he has ambitions in everything, which is another form of killing. His non-violence, and what will stop him? not Gandhi. His non-violence is really a form of violence. Non-violence is an idea, right? Why don't we deal with a fact which is violence? Why do you have to put that picture of non-violence in front of me? I say deal with what is here. I have had discussions with Gandhi's disciples, with his followers, endlessly about this matter. I said to them often, we have had this war between India and Pakistan, and you talked about non-violence. Were any of you conscientious objectors? Did any of you go to prison for peace? Not one of them. It meant absolutely nothing. So what's the point of non-violence? It's a jargon, an escape. I know if I'm violent how to deal with this. But you are all the time dangling in front of me this non-violence, which is not real. Questioner. Do you think we will just keep on going like this, warring among ourselves for all of history? Okay, you're asking the same question in different words. What is the future of man? Unless we radically change, the future is what we are now. It's a serious fact. And nobody wants to change radically. They change a little bit here, a little bit there. If you want peace, you live peacefully. But nobody wants to live peacefully. Neither the Pope nor the Prime Minister nor anybody. So they're keeping up the wars. I've talked to a great many politicians in my life, a great many spiritual leaders, to gurus who come to see me. I don't know why. They never talk about ending conflict, which means finding out the cause of conflict. Never. Let's say nationalism is one of the causes. Never talk about it. If the Pope said tonight that the Church will excommunicate anybody who joins the army to do organized killing, then tomorrow he wouldn't exist. They would throw him out. I'm not cynical. I'm just looking at facts. So what will change man? Apparently nothing from outside. No church, no threats, no wars, nothing from outside. Change implies a great deal of inquiry, a great deal of search. Someone hasn't the time, so he says, tell me about it quickly. But one must give one's life to this, not just play around with it. The monks think they have given their life, but they have given their life to an idea, to a symbol, to somebody called Christ. The Hindus have their sannyasins, the Buddhists, their bhikkhus. It's the same phenomena. Questioner. It appears that we are at a unique time in history. Okay, yes, but the crisis is not in the world out there. Rather, it is inside us, in our consciousness, which means that man has to change. Questioner. Has your teaching and your writing made a change? Okay, with some, perhaps. I'm not looking to see if somebody's changed or not. It's like this. You give food to me, and if I'm hungry, I'll take it. And if I'm not, I look at it, smell it, say, it's very nice, and then wander off. Very, very few people are hungry for this kind of stuff. Buddha is supposed to have talked for 40 years, and there were only 2 disciples who understood, Moggallana and Sariputra, and they died before he did. There is the whole tragedy of existence. Questioner. Do you feel that your teaching has made a deep impression? Okay, some have given up their jobs, have said, we'll come to your schools. They are doing it because there are schools, not monasteries, not ashrams, but schools where you get a degree, of course. Questioner. So you feel that education is a place to really affect a change? Okay. If teachers were concerned, if education all over the world was concerned to bring about a new generation, they could do it. But they aren't concerned. They want to stuff the children with mathematics, biology, chemistry, to make them become good engineers. Society wants good engineers. There is money in it. Educators have enormous responsibility because they hold the future. More than the parents. Educators must be concerned with a holistic view of life. I've talked about it so much. We've got a school in California, a school in England, and 5 schools in India, and I've spent a great deal of time in all of them. But the parents want their children to be like themselves, have a good job, get married, settle down. Society around them wants that. So it's a tremendous battle with the parents, with the teachers, with the society. It's a sick world. Questioner. It seems as though there is as much physical sickness, like cancer, as there is mental sickness. Okay, they are related to each other. Questioner. When you meet someone who is sick physically, what is your approach? Do you heal? Okay, yes, but please, I want to make this quite clear. Healing is not my profession, not my work. Let me rather say, if someone cannot be cured, he's going to die. And death apparently is a horror to everybody. Whether diseased or healthy, death is something abominated. But death and life go together. You can't say, I'll keep death out there and life here. What matters is how you live before death, not after. Living is more important than dying. Living is, it's too complex. Questioner. Do you believe in rebirth? Okay, first of all, I don't believe in anything. Secondly, what is it that is going to be reborn? Say I have been suffering for 10 years and I die. Now will I in my next life go on from where I left off? Is there individuality at all? Is there the ego, my ego, your ego, a spiritual essence, the Atman, the highest principle? Questioner. Perhaps it's just a process. Okay, what is that? It's a process of thought. There's nothing sacred about thought, nor about the things that thought has created in the churches of the world. They worship it, but it's not sacred. There is something absolutely sacred, but you can't pick it up casually. You can't just believe. Do you understand? Men have searched for this in different ways and never found it. They have given their lives for it. It can't be found in an afternoon conversation or reading a book or going to some fanciful meditation. If you don't find it, what's the point of all this? One has to work on this for years to find out. It isn't just a game that you play. But people haven't the time, so they worship the one who has something. Or they kill him. Both are the same. Whether they worship or kill, both are exactly the same. Questioner. Isn't there some possibility of transmission between individuals? Okay. Now you are with somebody who is a little peaceful and who doesn't want a thing from you, and you feel quiet. But you have what? You have taken a drug for the time being, and the moment you leave here, it will all go. It's so obvious. Questioner. But if we're climbing some mountain, and we've come to see you, and because it seems that you are a few steps ahead, and Kay interrupts, I don't believe in climbing. There is no climbing. No, I am this, and I will become that. There's only this. Change this, that's all. Questioner. Why do you teach? Kay. Why does a flower bloom? We'll skip over the dialogue in the wholeness of life and just end with this last entry in Krishnamurti's notebook, written in the 60s in India, in the winter. He kept a notebook for 3/4 of a year. 1961. A journal. The trees were bare. Every leaf had fallen off. Even the thin, delicate stems were breaking off. The cold had been too much for them. There were other trees which kept their leaves, but they were not too green, some of them turning brown. It was an exceptionally cold winter. There was heavy snow all along the lower ranges of the Himalayas, several feet thick, and in the plains a few hundred miles away it was quite cold. There was heavy frost on the ground, and flowers were not blooming. The lawns were burnt. There were a few roses whose color filled the little garden, and the yellow pansies. But on the roads and public places, you saw the poor, wrapped up in torn, filthy rags, bare-legged, their heads covered up, their dark faces hardly showing. The women had every kind of colored cloth on them, dirty, with silver bangles or some ornament around their ankles and around their wrists. They walked freely, easily, and with a certain grace. They held themselves very well. Most of them were laborers, but in the evening as they went back to their homes, huts really, they would be laughing, teasing each other, and the young would be shouting and laughing, far ahead of the older people. It was the end of the day, and they had been laboring heavily all day. They would wear themselves out very quickly, and they had built houses and offices they would never live or ever work in. All the important people went by there in their cars, and these poor people never even bothered to look who went by. The sun was setting behind some ornate building in a mist that had been hanging about all day. It had no color, no warmth, and there wasn't a flutter among the flags of different countries. These flags too were weary. They were just colored rags, but what importance they had assumed. A few crows were drinking out of a puddle, and other crows were coming in to have their share. The sky was pale and ready for the night. every thought, every feeling was gone, and the brain was utterly still. It was past midnight, and there was no noise. It was cold, and the moonlight was coming in through one of the windows. It made a pattern on the wall. The brain was very awake, watching, without reacting, without experiencing. There was not a movement within itself, but it was not insensitive or drugged by memory. And of a sudden, that unknowable immensity was there, not only in the room and beyond, but also deep in the innermost recesses, which was once the mind. Thought has a border, produced by every kind of reaction, and every motive shapes it as with every feeling. Every experiencing is from the past, and every recognition is from the known. But that immensity left no mark. It was there, clear, strong, impenetrable, and unapproachable, whose intensity was fire that left no ash. It simply was there, to come and go, without pursuit and recall. The past and the unknown do not meet at any point. The past and the unknown do not meet at any point. They cannot be brought together by any act whatsoever. There is no bridge to cross over, nor a path that leads to it. The two have never met and will never meet. The past has to cease for the unknowable, for that immensity to be. We will end here for today.